Good evening and welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and I've got the lads back together, Supermac and John Gibson. Hi, lads.
Hey, nice to be together again.
And hi again, John.
Three musketeers, mate.
Yes, indeed.
Great to have you back, and it's been another interesting week at Newcastle United, and the games, as we know, are coming thick and fast, lads. Let's start with a positive, John. Last night, Newcastle United away to Bournemouth, which, to be fair, as me and Malcolm were discussing yesterday, it is a happy hunting ground. We've not lost down there since '89. A 4-1 comprehensive thumping of Eddie Howe's strugglers. What did you make of it?
Well, I mean, it was superb to watch from our point of view, not from Bournemouth's point of view, but I thought we knocked the ball around brilliantly. I mean, at one stage, I thought, we're watching Barcelona or Newcastle. We had about 70% of the ball. We were actually finding men with the passes, and we were finishing brilliantly. Now, yes, we can talk about how horrible Bournemouth are, and there's no question about that. But you've still got to play well, and Newcastle played well, and it was refreshing to watch. I don't know, even without the crowd there, because that takes away an awful lot in terms of enthusiasm, and I thought that was possibly our best display of the season, albeit who it was against. But I thoroughly enjoyed the whole of the 90 minutes.
Malcolm,
you would imagine, wouldn't you, that all of a sudden they had learnt this incredible lesson from Manchester City, because they played as somewhat similar to Man City last night.
Yeah, they did.
In the way that they passed it around, passed it, you know, and I thought, they're quick learners.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And now, of course, Steve, 42 points, safe, really as safe as houses, because the bottom three are just continuing to lose. So it's a double thing. We get 3 points and they yet again get none. 42 points with as many as 6 games to go. I mean, that is a fairly comprehensive season in terms of the fear we had when the season kicked off. And may I say as well that Saint-Maximin, for me, is just a breath of fresh air. I'm just thoroughly enjoying watching the lad, because I've always been, as a Newcastle United supporter, somebody, and Malcolm, you know this, that adores flair and adores flamboyance. And in what at times has been a grey world at Newcastle United, Saint-Maximin has brought that bit of sparkle and unpredictability to his play. That was a second away win on the trot. The other one was also on the south coast at Southampton all that time ago at the beginning of March, but it was successive away games just along the coast. Saint-Maximin scored the winner at Southampton, and we had 3 assists last night for the first 3 goals before he went off. And I thought he was a joy to watch. He was entertaining. And it's a long time since we've used that, Malcolm, for a Newcastle United player.
Yeah, and I thought it was quite exquisite the way he found Longstaff, because it'd gone through so many people going along the line, and there to his tight right, Sean Longstaff, and he just knocked it perfectly to him. And
terrific.
Yeah, it was a joy to watch, I have to say.
One of the things, Malcolm, when if you remember, when Saint-Maximin first come to us, one of the things that was said about him is, yes, he can look like a show pony, he's got all the skills in the world, but he doesn't get his head up in the final third and either pick out his shot or pick out his pass. That side of his game's improved immensely. He got his head up on all 3 of the first goals and played terrific balls into Gale in space. The cutback for Longstaff, as you were saying, Malcolm, I think that was the pick of the pass of the night. And then the first time ball in for Almiron. I think he's added an awful lot to his game. He's exciting, he's young, and the challenge now to Newcastle United, Steve, is that you keep players like him, you build a team around him. You don't do what they've done in the past when they've had great wingers who have got flair, like Ginola, like Chris Waddle. You don't cash in on them. and sell them on, your one worry for Newcastle United fans is that at any time in the near future, we do not sell on Saint-Maximin, but we get players in to play around them and finishers to get goals regularly round the boy. Don't let happen what's happened in the past, because he really is today's entertainer in the way that Ginola and Waddle were. And if you go back to when I was a kid, and neither of you remember this because I'm old enough to be at both your granddads. There was a fella called Bobby Mitchell who had twinkle feet and was a terrific winger and was an entertainer. What Mitch had, of course, was Jackie Milburn at centre forward to finish off all his good work. Saint-Maximin needs a centre forward of that nature. But please keep him and please build a team around him. Don't cash in him.
And I think we've all criticised Steve Nixman and the recruitment team and Mike Ashley, for bringing in Joe Linton and wasting £40 million of the club's money. But by God, what a great investment Saint-Maximin's been for £17 million.
No question about that. No question about that. However, having said that, we've still got loads of people on the books where money has been wasted. I mean, Servat has been here for 5 years or something and is still a Newcastle United player. And we've had a ton of people like that. We've got Jacob Murphy, who has been out on loan, what happens with him, etc., etc. There's Joe Linton still to justify his money. There's Kraft, the right back, despite doing quite well last night, has done nothing to justify his money as yet. And there's the invisible man, Christian Atsu, who again hasn't lived up to his fee. But people like Saint-Maximin has been a wonderful discovery, and I think fans would give a tick and a plus, Malcolm, to Miggy Almiron as well, as somebody as a relentless runner who looks as if he has a joy in playing. Has done well for Newcastle as well.
Mm.
Yeah. What about Lazaro then, Malcolm? I mean, he's on loan at the moment. His loan period will be up, obviously, at the end of the season. £20 million is the fee if we want to make it permanent. Has he done enough, do you think, to secure a move to St James's Park? And do you think it's something that Newcastle would be interested in?
Can you imagine having him on the right-hand side, Saint-Maximin on the left-hand side? That would frighten sides. I think Lazaro, there is an awful lot more to him that we haven't yet seen. And well, would somebody be brave enough to play two out-and-out wingers in Saint-Maximin and Lazaro? It would be interesting just to see how they got on. I think, yes, I think I would be tempted to take him. If they're prepared to spend 40 million on Joe Linton, then certainly I would take Lazaro.
I think he finished well last night. I thought all the four finishes, Malcolm,
yes,
the strikes as well as the setup, were terrific. And I think he did well last night. I think the simple answer, Steve, from my point of view to your question, would you take him for 20 million now, is I would do it the other way on. I would say that he did enough in his cameo role last night to deserve a chance. We've still got 6 matches to go, remember, until we've got to make that decision on Lazaro. And I think what he has done is earn the right to start. And if he starts and you play Almiron, say Malcolm is a 10 behind your centre forward and Saint-Maximin, although there'll be a lot of changing of personnel because the matches are 3 a week if you go Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday. I think he needs to start now so we can get a good look at him, and that will make the decision on whether we should keep him or not.
Yes, absolutely. There's one that we haven't mentioned so far, and that's Dwight Gale. And I just thought that first goal that he put in last night, it was typical centre forward play, in as much that he's missed a sitter in one game, and within 5 minutes of the next one starting, he shots them in fine style. And I thought that to me is a typical goal scorer. That you miss one, you score one. You miss one, you score one. And I thought he looked really good last night, and particularly in the way that he finished. I was saddened when Sean Longstaff did his hamstring, because he was playing in that unfamiliar role, and he was almost a centre forward.
Yes.
Wasn't he?
And very much so. He was a pushed-on number 10, Malcolm, wasn't he?
Sure. Yes. And Dwight Gale was playing off to the side of that position that Sean was taking up. And I thought, well, is that really the instruction that he's been given? But no matter what, it was working. And didn't Bournemouth look a sad side?
Oh, desperate.
Absolutely. They put in a lot of effort, but they really just are not good enough. It's almost as if their players have gone backwards, seriously backwards.
Eddie Howe's come out in the Chronicle tonight and said that his team are really struggling without a crowd.
Struggling with a crowd, remember?
Yeah, exactly. I found it a bizarre thing to say. I feel sorry for Eddie Howe. I mean, he's been championed as a future England manager. He's one of the English coaches. He's had a great run with Bournemouth, but unfortunately, his team just haven't been good enough this season. And he has had a lot of injuries as well to contest with. But I would agree with you, Malcolm. I think that last night showed it. Highlighted it even more. That they're just not good enough, are they? The team aren't good enough.
No, I think you've got Norwich, you've got Bournemouth that are going down, and then you're looking at possibly it's Aston Villa.
Watford.
There's Watford still there. A terrific result for West Ham last night, Malcolm, to beat Chelsea. It's superb, but they're not out of the woods yet. But we are, so they can all fight as much as they like, Steve. For me, we are out of it. They can make their own arrangements, them five. But people like Norwich and Bournemouth, I can't see a way back for those two at all.
Just talking of West Ham and our next opponents on Sunday, it was interesting to see that Noble, the captain, didn't play last night. He was out injured. That's the best I've seen of West Ham this season in all the times that I've seen them. And so I've got no criticism at all of Mark Noble. He puts absolutely everything and more into every performance. But they were a better side without him.
Interesting.
And I just thought, I wonder what we're going to see when they play Newcastle this coming weekend. If Noble is still out, will they be able to maintain that form that they had against Chelsea? And Chelsea have been going exceedingly well of late.
Absolutely.
They found West Ham a real handful.
Yeah.
We've got a good game coming up this weekend.
Yeah, we are, but I think Newcastle played last night. There's always that option that teams, when they think that they're safe, can play with the flip flops on, or play as if they're on holiday. But Newcastle have come back, John, with an absolute determination to get as many points as they can. And with the exception of the FA Cup game of the weekend, where I just feel we should have gone for it, we didn't, and it's gone now. But I think last night and in the previous league games, Newcastle have gone for it, and they certainly look determined to finish the season in style.
I mean, I've been delighted to see that, because my one worry was, yes, you do come back with your flip-flops on and you say, well, the job is done, we'll go through the motions. You're more hungry, Bournemouth. You're more hungry, Aston Villa, when we played them. You're more hungry, West Ham, this weekend, because you've got something to fight for. If you're going to get nasty, you can have the match. No, we didn't. And that is very, very good to see. I know it's professionalism and we should expect that, but we don't necessarily. And the way Newcastle have come back in the league after the lockdown is delighted me, because it has knocked certain sides like obviously Sheffield United and Leicester, right off the perch. They were having a terrific season, had 3-month break, and have come back and look very, very average, both sides. Whereas Newcastle have come back in the league, not the FA Cup, and look more than decent. Of course, what happens now when we go on from here is that we've played, I think it's now 5 matches in 2 weeks for Newcastle, including the Cup. Is how many changes are we going to see to the side, because players it's the summer, not the winter. They've had a long break, so how fit are they? And you're going to get a lot of changes. There was 6 last night from the Man City game, and are we going to get another few this weekend? I would think we possibly will. Whether some of them that were rested, like Rose and Hayden and Almiron, will start, and others get a rest. The team selection, it confuses the picture on how good you're going to be. Although with 6 changes last night, we still look better than we've looked before.
Do you think that's something that they'll keep, Malcolm? Do you think, the substitutions is obviously, they've increased the amount of players you can have on the bench, increased the amount of substitutions due to the COVID outbreak and the fact that we've been off for so long. But do you think it's been beneficial? Do you think it's something that they'll keep? It's
a really good question, is that, Steve? I have a feeling that once COVID has passed in its history, then it will return to 3 subs. Or rather 3 subs can come on. I don't see why not. They should continue using 5 substitutes, but I've got a feeling they'll go back to 3. Do you think, because it's crossed my mind that the game actually stays fresher longer with 5 subs to each side?
I do.
Instead of starting to see tired legs and what have you in the last 15-20 minutes.
Yeah, I think it makes it more exciting in a lot of ways, John. I think it keeps it keeps the interest going as well, but it gives you that opportunity to think about the game a bit more tactically as well. And formations can be changed, and teams that so often, because of a loss of a player through injury or an injury, or maybe he's getting a yellow card and he's got a chance of a suspension, it means that people can change it a bit. Formations can be changed, and I think it's certainly a different idea, but one which you could certainly keep as part of the game.
Yeah, I think for starters, since the lockdown, generally, not necessarily last night, but generally the second half, Malcolm's been much better. Not Newcastle, all the games, the second halves have been much more entertaining than the first halves, which often have been.
I would agree on that. Yes.
But then with new subs coming on and the legs, keeping the tempo, keeping high because of the fresh legs, etc., the second halves have opened up and been a joy to watch. So I know it was done because of the weather. You're playing in June and July instead of December. And I know it was done because of the lack of fitness of players having sat on their backsides for 3 months and then had to get fit very, very quickly. And there was injury problems. But it has certainly made this second half of the season that much more entertaining, the extra subs. I think, like Malcolm, they will go back to 3 and they will go back to normality when it is normal. But when will that be? Will it be normal when next season starts in September? It may not be.
I can't see it being normal at all, John. Not until certainly well into next year.
Yeah, I think you're right, mate. I think you're right.
I'll put a poll up on our NUFC Matters Facebook page, and if people haven't joined it, please just search NUFC Matters and you'll find us on there. The question I put up was, when the takeover is granted, notice what I did there, lads.
I did notice, mate. It's automatic. That's good.
By the Premier League, has Steve Bruce has he earned a chance to stay on as head coach? And we only put that up about an hour ago, and we've had nearly 200 votes on it. 145 people say yes, and 43 people say no. I'm just going to read out a few of the comments on there. Frankie Durham says, I was a no, but I do think it would be harsh to replace him right away. However, if the new owners have really got their eyes on Pochettino, then they'll get him in ASAP. We need a proper goal scorer or two under whoever is the coach. Marty Wilcox has a different point of view. He says, yes, he has. However, if we are going to have the spending power we hope, will he be able to manage the kind of players we dream to bring in? Will Champions League winners on mega salaries take notice of Steve Bruce? Aaron Mitchell says it depends on the ambition. He's a scrapper and has utilised what we have, but does he have the nous to go toe-to-toe with the big boys? I'm not sure. Mark Bailey says, start of the season I would have said no, but to be fair, he's doing better than expected, so give him a chance. I'd say yes. Robbie Hoff says, if the takeover is successful, there's no more certain the manager and his coaching staff will be disposed of, and that's the nature of the situation. They would want their own management team in place, and if are going to be taken to the next level, a lot of players will be surplus to requirements as well, because some of them will not be good enough, unfortunately. Ian Thompson, he says, the frustration of the takeover has worn me down now. I need it resolved. Have the feeling that there is something stipulated, such as end of season in the contract. And David Taylor says, going off his current record, Steve Bruce's, that is, yes, and we have played more entertaining football, which is always good to see. The forward players prefer playing under Bruce compared to Rafa, and the squad looks a happier squad. But if and when big money comes in, they will start thinking like a massive club, rightly or wrongly. And if the takeover happens, they will be waiting for Bruce to slip up to get rid and put their own man in place. But good on Bruce. He's grafted his balls off and deserves all the plaudits. FA Cup quarter-final and a good Premier League points return. Well done to Steve Bruce. So some interesting views there, but a lot of positivity for Steve Bruce, which you certainly didn't see at the start of the season, lads.
No, and I don't think you saw it some 2 or 3 months later either. I've been impressed of late with Steve Bruce until Sunday, and if Newcastle United, when the takeover has happened, is going to compete seriously with all the top sides, I'm afraid that Steve showed a dreadful naivety in the way that he sent Newcastle out to play against Manchester City. Playing five at the back, as he did, all it does is hand the game and possession of the ball to Manchester City. It hands it to the opposition, and it finished up with five just stretched across the 6-yard box. And Andy Carroll was a passenger because nobody was getting in touch with him. Nobody was getting there to support him. All he was getting was long balls just booted out of the penalty area. You know, that's not top-class football. And there's got to be something cleverer, and there certainly is an awful lot that's cleverer than just saying, oh, well, they're a much better side than us, we'll play five at the back. It doesn't work. It hands the game to them, and a side like Manchester City will destroy you. If you give them that much ball, and in the first half, good heavens, I think they had 188 passes to Newcastle 15 or something like that. And so I've got this question mark about Steve Bruce. Can he really achieve what the people who are taking over want to see and want to have to get where they want to be? And where they want to be, of course, is playing in Europe. And so you've got to take on the Man Cities of this world and beat them to get into Europe.
I think it's very interesting what Malcolm said there. And the funny thing is, Steve, running that poll was that you run it, of course, immediately after what I consider our best display of the season at Bournemouth, and there's huge support for Steve. If you'd run it half-time 4 days before at Man City, when we were never over the halfway line in the first half of the cup, I think it would have been exactly the other way on. But looking at the broad view of what should happen, first and foremost, you've got to say, whether you're a Bruce fan or you're not, what he's achieved in the league with 42 points and safety with 6 games to go against the backdrop of Ashley's suffocating style of ownership and the Premier League dithering, that it is quite incredible, and great credit has got to go to the man for that. Having said that, my thought, if and when this takeover happens, that it's not, sadly, I don't think it's going to be a matter of whether Steve Bruce starts next season or not, bearing in mind next season starting in September. I don't think the takeover will be through in time for them to immediately put in place a new manager to look after the situation from day one for September. It normally doesn't happen that way. The manager that's at the club stays very short term, and then absolutely inevitable, as Malcolm said, they bring their own man in. But not, I mean, Hughes at Manchester City stayed for almost a year before he was replaced, and we went through Mancini and everybody up to Pep. Big Sam stayed when Ashley come for a short while before Ashley went and got his own men, etc. I think there's because this has dragged on so long, the takeover, I think there's a very good possibility that regardless, that Steve Bruce will see the start of next season, because we're running out of time. We're into July now and the season starts in September. I don't know that they are ready to they have never indicated that they are going to change the manager immediately. They've indicated privately they may not immediately. I would expect change, but not necessarily straight away. What is horrendous in all this is that the club, which has done so well to get to this position where we know we're not going to be relegated, cannot now really plan for the future. Steve Bruce doesn't know if he's got a future at St. James's. We go and we give a contract to Andy Carroll. We give 4 years to Manquillo. What are we doing? Are we putting elastoplast over gaping wounds because we don't know whether we can afford the big-time players because we don't know if we've got a takeover or not? How do we actually plan? I mean, the plans that are going on now behind the scenes is for the status quo, that the club, regardless of who owns it, is going to have Steve Bruce in charge and have the limited transfer kitty that it's got now. And we're making decisions along those lines, lads, aren't we? You know, we're allowing players to go. We're giving contracts. I mean, would a new owner and a new manager, if there'd been one, give 4 years to Manquillo? I don't think so. I would give him a year, certainly, but sure, I don't think I'd give him 4.
They wouldn't.
They would, of course. And would, with all respect, given his fitness record, never mind his goal-scoring record, would Andy Carroll get another contract at a club that was aiming for the looking up rather than making certain they're not looking down? So it all depends on how quickly this goes through. But I mean, I'm losing the will to live, to be truthful, over this talking. I have never waited so long for something to happen in all my life. It is got nonsensical. And the amazing thing is, you know, that the Premier League are slower than a snail with a limp. Because, I mean, if you look back a couple of years to Southampton, the Southampton takeover of the people that now own them took even longer than this. Took months upon months upon months. And then they were turned down. And it was on appeal. They appealed against the decision that they were turned down by the Premier League, and then the Premier League passed it. So these things can take an incredible amount of time. Of course, there's problems, else it wouldn't take this time. And we know what the problems is, the piracy, and we know why the holdup is. They're trying to do deals behind the scenes with the Saudis to get the right resolution to the TV piracy thing. But in the meantime, 50,000 Geordies plus all the rest, never mind people within the club, are getting hung out to dry, and it is really becoming impossible. And therefore I say, honestly, thank you to the players and thank you to Steve Bruce, as we must, for the attitude you've shown since the lockdown, since you've come back from the lockdown, to collect the points you have, because you could have easily hid behind, the confusion, we don't know where we are, what we're doing, and had the flip-flops on, as you said, Steve. But we need an answer to this, and we need it quick.
Yeah. Would you agree, Mal? I mean, it has dragged on. Richard Masters, of course, has been back on the television again this week and given us no answers whatsoever. And, letters have been written, etc. But it is dragging on. Another question, I suppose, is do you think this is maybe all teed up for an end-of-season announcement now?
Quite possibly, yes. I think that because there was so much dissent about who the purchasers are, that's caused the Premier League to say, right, we just need a bit of time to let the protests die down, and I just have the feeling that apart from the fact that the Premier League's had to concentrate on getting football restarted in the most dramatic of circumstances, having got that underway, they are then going to have to face end of season and getting a new season started in a very short space of time. So their concentration is elsewhere. Newcastle, I would think, is coming way down the list of priorities, but they are going to have to make a decision. I think it will come once the season is over, and certainly well before the next season actually starts. So, go on, John.
I think just, we've all got our take on it. I think it's not so much now that the mind's been elsewhere or they're gearing it to be the end of the season. I think it's quite simply a matter of the Premier League they're taking this rare opportunity. They haven't been able to sort out this TV piracy thing. For 2 years they've been trying and been unsuccessful. They've now actually got a big stick they can use on the Saudis, saying, you get that sorted and we will pass you Newcastle United. And I think they need this sorted because it's their money that's been siphoned off the Premier League by the piracy. And I think it's how long's a piece of string. They're willing to sit there until the Saudis give them the absolute guarantees they can see working that this piracy is at an end, or if the Saudis aren't forthcoming with that, then they'll get knocked back. And sure. I think it's all geared to sorting the piracy thing out from the Premier League's point of view. You sorted and you've got a deal. You don't sort it, I'm sorry, you ain't got a deal. And there is huge conversation between the two parties in private, behind the scenes, and that will be the key. The TV piracy will be the key to what happens at Newcastle United. Not the length of time, not the leagues restarting, not the next season restarting, not wanting to sort it for the end of a season neatly tied up in a bow. It's a matter of you give us what we want, what we should have, because there shouldn't be piracy, or good night to ideas. And right. I think
it's interesting, that, John, very interesting, because to back up what you're actually saying is that the Saudis have actually made major changes already. They're doing it very, very quickly, aren't they? They've still got a way to go. I understand that. But nevertheless, they are moving quickly. And that suggests that what you're saying is absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And we've just got to hope, because otherwise we go back to plan A, where we're stuck with Mike Ashley and go through all this procedure again with Americans, some other consortium. And I think Geordies have lost the will to live if we end up down that route. But it's on a knife edge. But I honestly think, Martin, the Premier League's only chance of getting piracy sorted is to hold up the Newcastle thing and squeeze until they get the deal they want.
It's very interesting because there's an article today by Gabrielle Marcotti of ESPN, and she's had her say on the takeover, and she says, and this is a quote from the article, the impression, and it's just a gut feeling, is that the piracy matter is a bigger stumbling block, and if PIF is willing to work with the Saudi government to make it come to an end, the takeover will come one step closer. You also get the impression that the Premier League clubs would welcome the deal. In the short term, it would inject some liquidity into the league hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. But in the medium and long term, there is little reason to believe Newcastle will be a threat on the pitch because of the existing cost controls and safeguards. Whether it's a desirable for an authoritarian, unelected regime to own 1/20th of one of Britain's biggest and most prestigious brands is another matter. Now, that's obviously just someone's opinion, Gabrielle Marcotti of ESPN. But a lot of people are coming to the same way of thinking as you, John, that there could literally be, it is down to that. And Malcolm's quite right. There has been a lot of movement by the Saudis to stamp this out.
I think that's absolutely true. And when you look at it from the Premier League's point of view, this is their only chance to get this stamped out. If this doesn't work, they've tried through the courts, through diplomatic scenes, they've tried for 2 years and got absolutely nowhere, and they will see this as their last chance to do that. And before they say yes, they will not just want verbal promises, they'll want to see it actually carried out in the physical response of all these networks and stations being closed down, etc., and have concrete evidence that that's happened before they allow the thing to go through. In the meantime, we sweat, and we all sweat, and if there's any good at all coming out of this, in my warped little mind, it's at least Mike Ashley's been made to sweat before he gets his 300 million.
Yes, he's still spending money like it's going out of fashion, though, buying more percentages in other businesses. So there's still hope in my mind that this is, it will get rubber stamped, and that he will get what he wants, which is an exit, and it'll happen sooner rather than later. I want to talk a little bit about Sean Longstaff. Malcolm, you touched on him earlier, but it was good to see him before he went off injured, in a little bit of a different role, and that number 10 role, give him a little bit more freedom, gets him into an advanced position, and he took advantage of it last night with that goal after great work by Almiron and St Maximin.
Yeah, he certainly did, and you could see that he was thoroughly enjoying playing in that new role for him. Whether he would be able to have that kind of success against most other Premiership clubs, I'm not too sure, because I think Bournemouth were absolutely awful, quite disorganised last night. I still feel that there is one major influence in the Newcastle side that sort of excludes Sean Longstaff from being in the centre of it all, and so it's the central midfield. I've noticed that Sean Longstaff doesn't play well. He doesn't get on. And midfield is all about sort of partnerships and what have you. Everybody's got to be able to get on, and I just feel that that he can be a bit ignored by other players at times. So it's a shame, but I think that he could really blossom. But it's not happening for him at the moment, and therefore in this new role then he does blossom, but the central midfield is where I think he's going to finish up. But you see, John Joe Shelby will change his game according to not who he's playing against, but more who he's playing with. That he that sometimes he will go and play behind the centre halves. Sometimes he'll go and be playing just behind the centre forwards. You never know quite what he's going to do next. And it's almost as if he wants to stitch up other players. And I think, well, are you that selfish a player? And I've got to say, I think he is. I think he's quite cunning, and I think that he can change his game to upset others. And that's not good for general team play. Not good at all. And I think that it's Sean Longstaff. It's usually the youngsters who suffer most of all, and Sean Longstaff is suffering by it. But with that move of position, it took him away from John Joe Shelby, and gave him a lot more freedom, and he looked terrific. And he played with an abandon that he normally doesn't have when he's in midfield. So I like the freedom that he had, and I think he thoroughly enjoyed it. And you could see when he did pull his hamstring how annoyed he was, because he was enjoying his football so much at that particular moment in time.
John, what do you make of the ongoing Matty Longstaff situation? He wasn't involved last night, and do you think there's any resolve to it yet?
No, I think he's going to go. I think all the indications you see is that he's going to go. When a young man of his talent goes in against Manchester United and scores a great goal, and you have Steve Bruce, a fellow Geordie who knows, lauding him to the skies and saying what a great player he is with a great attitude, etc., etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, before the lockdown and since the lockdown, you never see him. He's not involved at all. In my gut feeling, that is the way a player is treated when the club knows he's going. When the club knows he's going, they just say, right, stick him on a shelf, stick him over there. We're not going to play him, etc., because it isn't happening. Sadly, I don't mean that I wish it to happen. Sadly, I think that regardless of words that are put out, and of course the club are going to say, we're making a great effort to keep him. You can't not say that to the fans. And maybe they are making a great effort to keep him. But if that's the case, I think Matty's already decided mentally that he's going. And I would be staggered if, bearing in mind there'll probably be not a new regime in time to stop all this happening, because
Sure.
Of course, we're beyond the end of the official season, the June the 30th thing now, an extended contract to see out the last 6 games. But I think, sadly, he'll go.
Yeah, but John, his contract ended 2 days ago.
Yeah, but he signed an extension, Malcolm, so he could play in the 6 games. But only until they're over, which is the end of July, isn't it? When the 6 games are over, he signed the contract so he could take part in this part.
I see.
As the on loan players did.
Then why aren't they using him?
Well, that's right, because they think he's going. They want him on that contract in case they get 84 injuries. But if you're not making, Malcolm, I saw an excuse and I smiled at Steve Bruce when he was asked about Atsu, another fella. Since the lockdown, he hasn't been on the bench or anything. And he says, well, he wasn't feeling too well when we come back to training. He hasn't done well. And he just hasn't been able to squeeze into the 20. If you're first, because now with the bench being 9, 20, if you can't get in the first 20 in your first team and you're fit, you've got to want to cut your throat or get a transfer. It's tough, It's not tough to get in the 11. It's tough to get in the 20. Well, Matty's not getting in the 20 and Atsu's not getting in the 20. What does that tell you?
Yeah, indeed. And I think you're right that Matty Longstaff, he will be gone before the start of next season, and good luck to him. I wish him well. But Newcastle United should never have allowed this situation to have arisen in the first place. They should have got it all sorted out somewhere around the beginning of last year.
Yeah.
But with regards to Atsu, I think the club are regretting having signed him in the first place, and of course it was Benitez who was responsible for that. Do you know, I still remember that loan period that he had from Chelsea. I think it was the season before last, wasn't it? And in that loan period, I thought he was rubbish in every single game until he got to the last game, and all of a sudden he was a different player. And then they signed him. What, on the strength of one game, for heaven's sake? And he's pretty much returned to what he was in that original loan period. Not good at all.
He plays like a headless chicken, Malcolm,
sure,
doesn't he?
You know, I've always got one simple question to put to players who are particularly playing up front, and that is, what have you achieved? What have you achieved in the last 90 minutes? What have you achieved in the last month? What have you achieved and get them to really think about what they've actually accomplished. And Atsu, what has he achieved? Nothing at all. He's not impressed me. Has he impressed you guys?
Yeah.
I mean, no, not at all. I mean, the simple answer, Mal, the simple question for me is that when we play on Sunday against West Ham, who would you want to be on the left side of the attacking three? Would you want it to be Atsu or would you want it to be Maximum?
Yeah.
Now, there's the difference there is chalk and cheese, isn't it?
Isn't it? Absolutely, yes. Yes, it is. And then somebody could say, well, he could play on the other side. Well, who would you want, Atsu or Lazaro?
Yeah. Or Almiron.
Or Almiron. Yes, indeed. And Almiron really isn't. He's still not quite doing it, I think, to anything near what he is finally going to achieve. But Atsu, he's had too much time, too much opportunity, and has failed in every way.
Yeah. I want to ask you both about the situation at Wigan Athletic. Obviously, the COVID outbreak and subsequent loss of football has affected lots of teams. And I'm sure this is something we're going to see, unfortunately, quite frequently over the next few weeks, announcements from teams that they're going to have to go into administration. But has it surprised you with Wigan in particular? Because it's only, a month or so since they were taken over and now this announcement, and they've been doing quite well, Wigan, as well.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I was surprised it was Wigan. I've been waiting for some clubs like a domino effect to go into administration through the coronavirus. But having said that, that's just brought everything to a head. So many clubs live beyond their means anyway. They live on tomorrow's money today. And when there isn't a tomorrow because of the coronavirus, no crowds, then today's money's dried up and they have that effect. Football clubs are notorious for living on Fantasy Island, on the hope, I'm talking beneath the Premier League, on the hope of what tomorrow might bring. Or if we invest, if we gamble, if we pay a little bit over the top, if we pay too much wages, but we get promotion, then we're in the land of milk and honey, etc., etc. And the reality is hitting and is going to hit an awful lot more clubs. I was surprised, as you say, Steve, that the first club that was hit was Wigan Athletic, which is a sadness, and it's a sadness, and you know them, Malcolm, the Whelan family, and you know them very well.
Yes.
And it's a great sadness when you think of what Dave Whelan did for Wigan, which was a little bit like Jack Walker did for
Blackburn Rovers, yeah.
The multi-millionaire guy that doesn't jump on the bandwagon of Manchester United and Arsenal and Spurs and the big clubs, but sticks with his hometown club, whether that's Blackburn or Wigan, and makes them something. And I mean, Jack took them to Premier League champions with Alan Shearer centre forward at Blackburn, and Wigan went all the way from non-league soccer into Premier League and won the FA Cup not
Beating
that
Man
many
City,
years
of
ago.
course.
Not that many years ago, won the FA Cup, didn't it? They beat Man City, I think, in the
Man
final.
City, yeah.
And so, you know, it's a tragedy when you see a club that's had a lot of romance about it, like Wigan, get into the trouble they've got in here. And we don't know yet that they can see out the end of this season and start next season in whatever division they're in.
That's right. And John, sorry.
Oh, absolutely.
Once one club goes, then a lot of people get very twitchy, particularly though that those people making decisions within banks.
Yeah, you're right. And creditors.
One goes, and so they all start getting very, very twitchy, and you find that that's just the start of a whole avalanche of other clubs.
Yeah, we lost Bury, didn't we? And now Wigan, we worry about.
There'll be more to come in the next few
when
weeks.
You see a club, Malcolm, of the background, which we will remember, Bolton Wanderers, when they had Nat Lofthouse and were winning the FA Cup at Wembley, etc. What's happened to them? They've just gone into the bottom tier of the Football League and taken the manager of Barrow, I think, today, as their new manager. They've been in free fall, and you do worry, and you wonder who's going to be next. And I think if you're on Wearside, you worry.
Yeah, I mentioned that last night when we were talking with Malcolm and Steve and Neil, that Sunderland could potentially be, you know, in the mire, especially with the changes that they just made at the academy this week.
I mean, yeah, they are a club where they got new owners, and everybody thought that was wonderful down on Wearside, etc., etc. But the guy had only been at Islay, a businessman that was looking to make a quick buck. It hasn't worked out that way, and both he and the club are in dire straits now. And the last thing the Sunderland supporters or the club would have expected when they hit rock bottom is that they would be facing their third season in League One. They expected to get out the first time of asking, as Newcastle did twice in the Championship, or at least in the second season. But now, because that season's ended and they didn't make the playoffs with the points totted up, they're going to spend a third season in League One. That, for a club of Sunderland's size, is horrendous. And they've got to bear in mind that other equally famous clubs in the past are in that league with them, i.e. people like Portsmouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've got a game coming up, as we've already mentioned, on Sunday against West Ham. Proverbial strugglers at the moment, and they've got a great result last night against Chelsea, 3-2, of course. Let's talk about that game and look ahead to it. John, first of all, what's your views on that game?
Well, like anything, I think a lot's determined by the team sheet. You get a much better idea when you're going when you see the team sheet. For example, can Saint-Maximin, who's played in every game since the lockdown and who has become more and more and more our talisman, can you get another game out of him? I mean, the way before you give him the rest and then bring him back, because it's Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday. And him out the side would make a big difference. Or do you say, let's get this game out of him and sacrifice him at Man City on Wednesday? Because where you're more unlikely to get a result and you're against West Ham. And do you end up bringing back Almiron and Hayden and Rose and resting a few more? The team sheet will tell, but there's no question that Newcastle United can beat West Ham at St James's Park with or without the crowd and with or without the boost for them of the result against Chelsea. I've got no doubt that Newcastle can win this game and will want them to win this game. What'll be then interesting for me, fellas, is what does he then do at Man City? Do you go back to playing 5 at the back, throw the ball to them and sit back and say, we're going to try not to lose as opposed to win? Or do you say that was a disaster in the FA Cup, let's have a pop at them? That's going to intrigue me. Is what first things first, let's beat West Ham, and I believe more than capable of doing that. But I'm then going to be really intrigued as to what we do with Man City in terms of tactics.
Yes, and so am I, John. I thought playing five at the back in the way they did was an absolute debacle. But interestingly, watching West Ham last night, where they were causing real panic in the Chelsea defence, was free kicks and corners, and they were sort of grouping together and making it very difficult for Chelsea players to mark each individual. And so watching it, I thought, well, how are Newcastle going to cope? And Newcastle have got much better defenders at marking up in those situations. They've got much better players who will attack things in the air. And so I thought, where West Ham caused Chelsea a huge amount of problems, I don't think it'll be a great problem for Newcastle at all. I think they'll cope with it quite easily. So where is the threat going to come from West Ham? And I can't really see that. Certainly not the threat that they were posing with Chelsea last night. And I would, the one thing that I really dearly want to see Newcastle do is, having had a really terrific performance, is to have another one, have two in a row.
Yeah,
I can't remember when I last saw two really top class performances from Newcastle in a row. And
because of course you're right. When we beat Sheffield United 3, Malcolm, we then disappointed against Aston Villa in 1-1, didn't we?
And that's right. And it was a game for the taking.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, saying West Ham, because I didn't see the game because I was working immediately after Newcastle United for the office doing things, so then I missed West Ham. But saying that their dangers on the set pieces, ironically, that was the only thing before last night's game started that I worried about Bournemouth, because the only thing they've had going for them all season is their ability on set pieces. I think more than 50% of the goals that they've scored, that they have managed to score, have been set piece goals. But Newcastle weren't in great trouble from the set pieces last night either. I think West Ham will produce a sterner resistance than Bournemouth had produced, but that wouldn't take that much doing. But if Newcastle have the right attitude, and they've shown nothing but the right attitude so far, then I would expect them to win. But of course, I said that when we were playing Aston Villa after Sheffield United. So as Malcolm's just said, I want to see two good performances on the belt.
Couple of birthdays today, guys. Gordon Marshall.
Gordon Marshall, yes.
Celebrated today. I'm sure you've got some memories of him, John.
Yeah. When I first took over covering Newcastle United back in '66, when I come back from Fleet Street, Gordon was with us, and a good goalkeeper, Scots lad, as we well know, who has loved the club and always turns up and comes back down here and is well remembered.
John's disappeared.
Sorry? Who's disappeared?
Oh, you're back. Yes, you're back. You're back.
Houdini, eh? Not bad. Gordon Marshall, lovely man, good goalkeeper, underrated goalkeeper. Great friend of the old stalwarts, the Fairs Cup stalwarts, who started as a boys. People like Moncur and Craig and in the side when Marshall was the goalkeeper. Good lad. Anybody else's birthday today?
Every game as well in the 64-65 promotion season.
Yes, yeah. I missed that. I was in Fleet Street when that season was happening, and I had a folk. They asked me on one game. They asked me where I would like to go on the Saturday. Bearing in mind I was based in the south, to watch a match, and everybody was normally saying, "Well, I want to go to Manchester United. I want to go to Spurs. I want to go to." I said, "I want to go to Swindon." And they were absolutely staggered. And of course, I had nobody else who wanted to go to Swindon. And it was because Newcastle were playing Swindon. And I went to report the game for the Sun newspaper at Swindon, and Newcastle won 6. And I was absolutely delirious. in the paper give us about 3 paws in the Southern edition because it was Swindon v Newcastle. But I was in Marshall, of course, was in that side.
I can't imagine you, John, sitting at places like Millwall or Walsall,
Yes.
and being able to sort of lift your spirits if Newcastle weren't playing there.
No, I found I was normally then seen behind a haze of blue smoke that was coming from the Lodge cigar I had in my mouth when I was there and Newcastle weren't playing, because that happened on occasions as well. But I mean, I was delirious because I was being sent to Swindon. Everybody said it was confirmation that I was a Geordie nutcase, but Newcastle won 6, and it was a splendid afternoon from my point of view.
Francisco and De Lima da Silva, we had him on the show this week. Mirandina, of course, is the other birthday.
Yes.
The former incumbent of the number 9 shirt, Malcolm. We've heard his name a few times this week. I even got him to sing the song that was sung on the terraces about him this week on the show. So it was quite a joy to see. But yeah, I mean, he was interesting, Malcolm, wasn't he? He was the first Brazilian in football.
He brought him. Malcolm brought him.
Malcolm
brought him to Newcastle. He was the agent that got him to Newcastle.
Spoke very highly of you, Malcolm. He asked us to pass on his best to you, and he said, he said that he didn't quite reach your height, but he'd always thank you for getting him to Newcastle because of the affiliation he's got with the place.
Yeah, it was a close thing because Graham Souness was managing Rangers at the time, and he was seriously interested, really, really interested in Mirandinha. And then and Mirandinha was coming over with Brazil to play at Wembley, and Souness was sacked by Rangers, and so that sort of knocked that on the head. But Newcastle, they suddenly showed their interest, and he scored the only Brazilian goal in a 1-1 draw. And
it was Willie McFall, your old mate at time.
Yeah. And so the deal was done.
And thousands of Newcastle fans went out and brought sombreros for no particular reason, because people don't wear sombreros in Brazil. But
I wonder if they've got the sombreros now for Joe Linton. They can stick them on and sit and watch the telly on Sunday in their sombreros.
I did ask him about Joe Linton, and my God, I bet Steve Nixon wished he'd asked him, because Joe Linton, he wasn't very complimentary about him. I've got to be perfectly honest. He was polite, as Mirandinha is, but he wasn't very complimentary. And he said that Newcastle could have saved a bit of money if they'd come and asked me. But lads, the clock as always has beaten us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Good to get the team back together finally with a bit of jiggery pokery with technology. But we're there, so I look forward to getting you on together again next week, next Thursday, same time, same place. Hopefully, we can do a live one from 6 o'clock next week, though.
That sounds good.
An absolute joy to be with the pair of you again, lads.
No,
I always said I'd come and hunt you. You can't get away from Gibbo.
Malcolm, I'll get you on pre-match on Sunday. I'll sort that out with you. Thanks for joining us again, lads.
Not at all. No, lovely to see you again, John.
Thanks a lot. All the best, Miles, Steve. God bless you.
Thanks, lads.